All right, we need to talk. Because something detonated online in the last 48 hours, and if you blinked, you missed the entire chain reaction. And by the time this rundown ends, you're going to understand exactly why Cardi B just went nuclear, why BIA lit the fuse herself, and why Doja Cat somehow walked out of the wreckage cleaner than anybody else standing in the room. This one is layered. This one is petty. This one is personal. This one is the kind of story that starts with a Twitch stream and ends with a 19-minute forensic annihilation on xspaces, and you deserve to hear the whole thing sequenced correctly for once. Because 90% of the takes floating around your timeline right now are missing the single most important beat in the entire chronology. And this one is not the same rerun you have heard 50 times before, because tonight there is a receipt in this story that nobody in your feed has connected yet, and I am going to lay every single piece of it on the table before we are done. So let me set the stage the right way, because if you rush the setup you will miss the sequence, and the sequence is where the whole thing lives. It started, of all places, on a Twitch stream. Doja Cat, of all people, was online doing what Doja Cat does. She was vibing. She was moving. She was letting the music breathe through her the way she used to when she was a B-girl in the LA underground before any of us knew her name. She had a track playing in the background, a Fred Again record with BIA on the verse, and Doja was locked in. She was in that pocket. She was in that trance. She was riding it like the beat was a private conversation between her and the speaker. Now, here is where the internet did what the internet always does. The chat noticed. The chat clipped it. And within minutes, Doja's own supporters were flooding her stream saying, "Wait, hold on. Why are you playing that woman's song? Do you not remember what she said about you? Do you not remember how she moved on you? Roll the tape yourself and you will see. Doja is not slowing down. Doja is not turning it off. Doja is not even acknowledging the noise. She keeps her groove going like the chat does not exist. And that, right there, is the first moment of this whole saga that tells you exactly how Doja Cat is choosing to move in this new chapter of her career. Because let me remind you of something, family. Doja Cat used to be at war with her own comment section. There was a stretch, not that long ago, where Doja was clapping back at every single fan who breathed sideways at her. She was picking fights. She was daring people to unsubscribe. She was on a full-on burn-it-all-down tour of her own audience. And now? Now Doja is silent. Now Doja is smiling. Now Doja is letting the music do the talking and the drama fall off her back like water. That evolution matters, and it is going to matter more in about 2 minutes when we get to what Doja actually said on camera about all of this. But first, we have to talk about the person who inserted herself into this whole thing without being asked. Because BIA was watching. BIA saw Doja playing her record. BIA felt the moment. And BIA hopped online and did something that BIA almost never does in public. She apologized. Word for word. She went out there and told Doja Cat thank you. She genuinely apologized for anything shady she had ever said. She made it clear she had always appreciated Doja's music, and she wished Doja nothing but peace and blessings on the way out. Clean. Diplomatic. Adult. Exactly the kind of statement that closes a chapter with dignity. And Doja, being Doja in this new pocket, responded in the calmest possible way. She said no worries. She said hope you are having a good day. She did not gloat. She did not victory lap. She did not turn it into a headline. She just accepted it, kept moving, and left the internet to draw its own conclusions. Which, and I need you to catch this, is the exact opposite of what the internet actually wanted her to do. So now let me pull the camera back and show you what happened next, because this is where the whole thing turns from a tidy resolution into an absolute wildfire. The moment BIA apologized to Doja, the timeline flipped its brain upside down. And I mean flipped. Suddenly, thousands of people were in BIA's replies saying, "Hold on. Hold on. If you can be the bigger person with Doja, why can you not be the bigger person with Cardi? If you can eat crow for one, why not the other? If you are admitting you were shady in one direction, be consistent and admit it in the other direction." And I do not think BIA was ready for that pressure, because what she did next was absolutely unhinged. BIA got online and said, and I quote the spirit of it, "It is done with Cardi B forever. There is no apology coming. She knows what it is." And when people pushed her on the past, the diss track, the fake accusations, the sneak shots, BIA doubled down and said none of it was a lie. Everything I said, I meant. Everything I dropped, I stand on. She sealed the door shut on her own hand. Now let me pause for a second, because you have to understand who is watching all of this unfold in real time. Cardi B. And Cardi B, if you have followed her at all in the last 2 years, has been on a very particular kind of energy. Cardi has been going through the biggest reinvention era of her whole career. She dropped her second album. She wrapped a full tour. She has been rebuilding her brand from the ground up. She has been dealing with a divorce that would have flattened most human beings on this planet. And the last thing Cardi B was looking for was a reason to open old wounds. But BIA handed her the reason on a silver platter. And Cardi did what Cardi does. She saw the apology. She saw the exception. She saw the doubling down. She saw the sentence, "I stand on it." And she processed that sentence the way any human being on this planet would process it if it was aimed at them, which is to say, she went and got her keyboard, and then she went and got her microphone, and then she went and got her lawyers, and then she went and got her receipts, and then she opened the door of a live xspaces call and walked in like a woman who had been rehearsing this scene for 2 years. She got on xspaces. She lit a match, and she burned the entire house down. Drop your verdict below on this next part, because I need to know if you think Cardi went too far or if you think Cardi did what she absolutely had to do. Because what came out of that spaces was not a subtweet. It was not a jab. It was not a warning shot. It was a 19-minute forensic annihilation of BIA's entire public image, and Cardi did not miss a single beat. Now, I want to be upfront with you. If you have watched my breakdowns for a while, you know I have said before that I am tired of the Cardi B spaces meltdown format. I love the music. I love the deals. I love the branding. The online rant era of Cardi has worn me out. But this one I cannot pretend to be neutral on, because Cardi actually had a legitimate case, and she brought her whole case file with her. So peep the sequence, because Cardi walked into that spaces with a plan, and the plan was not a rant, the plan was a prosecution. She opened the whole session by pointing out something almost nobody else caught. At the end of Cardi's tour, when she was performing the record that people wanted to call a BIA diss, Cardi got on stage in front of thousands of her own people, and she told them, "Do not harass this woman. Do not go after her. Do not tag her. Do not spam her. Do not turn her into a target. We are having fun with the music, but we are not going to war with a whole human being." That is what Cardi told her fans out loud, in public, on the tour, at the very end of the run. And that gesture, that specific gesture, is what makes everything BIA did afterward look 10 times worse than it already did. Because Cardi extended the olive branch. Cardi de-escalated on her own stage. Cardi took the temperature down on her own dime. And BIA looked at that gesture, took it in, saw it, absorbed it, and still decided to pop back online talking sideways. That is what set Cardi off. That is the moment the spaces went nuclear. And once Cardi B decides you are the one who broke the truce, there is no version of the following 24 hours where you get to be comfortable. Now let me walk you through Cardi's actual case, because it is layered and there are 3 separate accusations on the table, and Cardi addressed every single one of them with receipts. Roll it back with me. Accusation number 1, that Cardi copied BIA's style. Cardi's response. Let me put it in plain English for you. Cardi said we sampled the same record. Both artists happened to lean on the same underlying sample around the same time. That does not mean anybody copied anybody. That is not a smoking gun. That is a coincidence. And the entire music industry runs on coincidences like that every single week of the year. Cardi went further and said if she was looking for inspiration in her career, she is looking at Beyoncé, she is looking at Rihanna, she is looking at Madonna, she is looking at Lady Gaga. She is not looking at BIA. She said it flat out. You do not inspire me. You never inspired me. And there is not a version of me that ever wanted to look, sound, dress, or rap like you. Accusation number 2, that Cardi copied one of BIA's music videos. Cardi's response. Same energy, colder tone. She said the two of them already had a conversation about it privately. They resolved it like grown women. They moved past it. And then, months later, BIA popped back up online and said Cardi copied her video anyway. Which means the private resolution meant nothing. Which means BIA was not actually looking to settle it. Which means BIA was looking for content. And Cardi clocked that. And this is where Cardi's whole demeanor shifted in the spaces. Because up until this beat, Cardi was still handling the case with a lawyer's tone. From here on, Cardi was handling it with a wife's tone, then with a mother's tone, and by the end, with a Bronx girl's tone. 3 registers. 1 woman. And every register hit a different vein in the audience. But accusation number 3, and this is where the entire Spaces turns from a rap dispute into a personal war. Accusation number 3 is the one that changes everything. Because according to Cardi, during her pregnancy with her youngest daughter, when Cardi was 6 months pregnant, sitting at home, watching Netflix, minding her own life, BIA allegedly went to 2 different rappers and one specific producer who runs in her ex-husband's circle and told them Cardi was cheating on her husband while she was pregnant. Let that sit for a second. Cardi says BIA planted a rumor in real industry rooms with real industry people that Cardi, pregnant, at home, off the internet, was creeping on her marriage. And Cardi was very specific about the timing. She said the rumors started circulating in April. She said she was almost 6 months pregnant when it started. She said she never DM'd anybody, never flirted with anybody, never even messaged anybody who could be misinterpreted as a flirtation during that entire stretch. She dared the internet to find a screenshot. She dared the internet to find a text. She dared the internet to find a name. And 48 hours later, the internet still has not produced one. And then Cardi did something in that Spaces that is going to make this whole thing very, very hard for BIA to walk back. Cardi said, in real time, that she has the names. She has the artists. She has the producer. And she is willing to publicly identify who told her exactly where the rumor came from and who dropped it. She is not floating an accusation. She is holding a receipt. And she made it clear, if this goes another round, she is opening the folder. That is the atomic beat of this entire Spaces. That is the reason Cardi went so far and pushed so hard. Because for Cardi, this stopped being about a rap record a long time ago. This stopped being about a sample. This stopped being about a music video. This became, in Cardi's own words, an attack on her family, on her marriage, on her pregnancy, and on her children at the most vulnerable moment of her entire adult life. And once you cross that line with Cardi B, there is no coming back to neutral. Now let me widen the frame, because there is another chapter of this Spaces that people keep glossing over, and I do not want you to miss it. Cardi pivoted mid-session and started addressing BIA's whole street persona, which, if you have been watching the timelines, has always been the softest part of BIA's public identity. Cardi hit the note directly. She said, and I am paraphrasing, "You are not from where you say you are from. You do not run what you say you run. You grew up in the safer side of Boston. You have been telling the world you have people in the Bronx, and I am telling you right now that the people you claim would side with me before they side with you." Cardi called the bluff on the whole street costume, and she called it in front of thousands of live listeners. She kept going. She said the only gang references BIA has ever really touched are the ones she saw on television. She said BIA raps about a fantasy, not a reality. She said the bodega references, the block references, the corner references, none of that is BIA's actual life. She said BIA is a Boston kid who has been playing dress-up in a New York identity for years, and that whole disguise is about to come down at the pace Cardi wants it to come down. And Cardi anchored it with her own biography. She said she got put on when she was 16. She said the man who put her on is still her best friend today. She said she never had to trade her body for a spot. She never had to trade her name for a spot. She never had to trade her dignity for a spot. She got put on the way people from her block get put on, and everybody on her block can vouch. Which is Cardi's way of saying, you want to have a conversation about credibility, we can have it, but I am the last person in this fight who loses that conversation. Now, I want you to understand something, because a lot of you are going to ask about this in the comments. When Cardi is going that hard, there is a version of it that reads as cruel. And I hear you if that is where you land. But the tape has to be heard in context. Cardi is not attacking BIA over rap. Cardi is attacking BIA over the alleged pregnancy rumor. That is the North Star of the whole Spaces. Every other punch was fuel. The pregnancy rumor is the reason the fire is burning at all. And if you strip that context out of it, you will not understand why Cardi's audience is defending her so aggressively right now. Cardi's audience is not defending a bully. Cardi's audience is defending a woman who is defending her pregnancy in public because the industry apparatus around her would not defend it for her. And then, right when the Spaces was cooling down, Cardi added the closer that a lot of people did not catch on the first listen. Cardi said, "You did not even write your own hit record." Cardi said she has the reference track. Cardi said she has proof that the record BIA is most known for came out of a room BIA was not in. And that is a nuclear-level claim in hip-hop culture. That is the kind of claim that ends careers if it is true and ends the accuser if it is not. And Cardi dropped it like she was going to expand on it later. She left that loop wide open on purpose. Which brings us all the way back around to Doja Cat. Sound off below on this next part, because I want to know if you think Doja played the whole situation perfectly or if you think she stayed too quiet. Because after all of this went down, after BIA lit the timeline on fire, after Cardi ended BIA's whole month on a Spaces call, Doja got back on stream and did something so simple, so grown, and so calm that it almost erased her from the story. Doja said she does not carry that energy. Doja said she is a 30-year-old woman with real responsibilities, and she does not have the superpower of being able to hold that many grudges and still function. Doja said if somebody says something about her being fat, ugly, stupid, or whatever, she does not take it personally, because she does not actually believe it is about her. She said the only version of that criticism that would ever hurt her is if she already hated herself, and she does not. She kept going. She said she is going to keep listening to BIA's music, because the music is the music, and BIA cannot take a song away from her by saying something shady online. She said hearing BIA's voice on a track does not make her flinch, and it does not make her clench up, and it does not follow her home at night. She said if BIA wants to try to hurt her feelings, BIA would have to actually know her, and BIA does not. And that is the single most secure sentence any celebrity has said this year. And then Doja said the line that I think is going to travel further than anything else in this whole cycle. Doja said the whole who shaded who framing that lives on rap Twitter is a high school framing. It is a note-passing framing. It is a hall monitor framing. And Doja said she is not fluent in that language anymore. She said she is trying to be a master of de-escalation because there is no scenario in her life where two adults with actual jobs and actual bills should be walking around holding on to petty grievances like collectibles. And you have to understand the weight of Doja saying that. Doja Cat is one of the biggest pop stars alive right now. She is not opting out of the game because she is not strong enough for it. She is opting out of the game because she is strong enough to leave it alone. That is a completely different posture than the one the culture usually rewards, and it is a completely different posture than the one Cardi is running right now. And they can both be right. That is the thing nobody is saying out loud. Doja can be right for choosing peace, and Cardi can be right for choosing prosecution, and BIA can still be wrong for the alleged behavior that started the whole thing. Now, some of you are going to read that as Doja subtweeting Cardi, and I want to shut that down before it turns into a whole side story. Doja was not talking about Cardi. Doja was talking about the culture of the genre. She was talking about how rap Twitter treats every ambient comment like a war crime and files it away forever. She was talking about the surveillance economy of celebrity feuds. She was not throwing shade at Cardi. She was throwing shade at the ecosystem. And Cardi and Doja actually have their own relationship that operates outside of all of this. But here is where the story gets even more interesting, and I need you to stay locked in for this part, because the pattern is bigger than any one beef. What we have watched over the last 72 hours is a live case study in 3 completely different women choosing 3 completely different survival strategies inside the same industry. Doja chose de-escalation. BIA chose escalation. Cardi chose forensic obliteration. And every single one of them is going to be judged by their own audience based on which strategy the audience already has an appetite for. And this is the meta-observation that most commentary channels are going to miss. Because if you zoom out from the beef itself, what you are actually looking at is 3 separate business decisions about how a black woman in the modern music industry survives sustained public conflict. And each of the 3 answers tells you something about the future of the artist who chose it. Doja's audience is going to love her because Doja gave them the version of Doja that they have been begging for since the Burn It Down era ended. She sounded evolved. She sounded well. She sounded like somebody who has actually done the therapy, done the healing, done the reflecting, and shown up on the other side of it. That energy is going to expand her career, not shrink it. Because the culture is starving for celebrity role models who are not addicted to the drama they generate. And Doja just planted her flag on that specific hill in the middle of the biggest rap conflict of the month. That is not a coincidence. That is a rollout. BIA's audience. And I am being careful here because I do not want to be reductive, BIA's audience is going to have to make a choice. Because BIA's whole brand has been built on the idea that she does not back down, she does not fold, she does not sweeten her tone for anybody. And the second BIA apologized to Doja, she cracked that armor herself. Which means she now has to explain why the armor held for one artist and not for the other. And that is a very hard sales pitch to make in public. And Cardi's audience is going to eat this spaces alive, because Cardi's audience has been begging for the receipts version of Cardi ever since the divorce headline started. They have been waiting for Cardi to stop half-explaining herself and start putting names and dates on the table. And that is exactly what she did. Cardi's audience loves Cardi for the same reason they have always loved Cardi, because Cardi refuses to be the polite version of herself when she is the one being wronged. That is her whole brand. That is her whole appeal. And this Spaces is a masterclass in Cardi refusing to be polite in front of an audience that specifically does not want her to be polite. Now let me hit you with something that most of the commentary channels are not going to touch, because it is uncomfortable, but it is real. When a woman in this industry says another woman spread a rumor about her while she was pregnant, there is a moment where every listener has to decide whether they believe her. And Cardi did something very smart in that Spaces. She did not just say the words. She named the framework. She said find one text, find one DM, find one flirt, find one screenshot, find one interaction between me and any man during those months. She dared the entire internet to fact-check her. And the internet has been trying for 48 hours and has come up with nothing. Which means, whether you like Cardi B or not, whether you agree with her tone or not, whether you enjoy the Spaces format or not, the case she laid out is still standing. That does not mean the case is over. That does not mean BIA does not get a response. That does not mean there is not a completely different version of events on the other side. But it does mean the receipts pressure is now on BIA to bring something back to the table. And so far, BIA has responded with silence, which is a very interesting choice. Because the BIA we saw hours before Cardi's Spaces was posting, everything I said was true. The BIA we saw during Cardi's Spaces was completely offline. That gap is doing a lot of talking without saying a word. Now let me pull one more thread, because this thread is going to matter for the next chapter of the story. When Cardi was in that Spaces, she said something about her ex-husband that a lot of people flew past. Cardi said the reason she and her husband ended up separating in the first place had nothing to do with her. It had to do with things she found out on his side of the marriage. And then she said the line that connects the whole triangle. She said one of the women in BIA's own circle was allegedly the woman on the other side of that breakdown. Meaning, the person who was closest to Cardi's marital pain was allegedly connected to the person who was spreading rumors about Cardi's marital fidelity. That is not a coincidence. That is a network. And Cardi framed it as a network on purpose, so the audience would understand that this is not one woman being petty. This is a whole friend group ecosystem that was allegedly moving on her while she was pregnant. And once you see it as a network instead of an individual, the story changes shape completely. Turn that over in your head for a second. That is the real weight of the accusation. Not that BIA said something mean. Not that BIA released a song. Not that BIA subtweeted from a burner. But that BIA was allegedly plugged into the exact social circle that was closest to the man Cardi was married to, and used that proximity to try to plant something in the industry water supply while Cardi was pregnant. If that is true, and I want to be careful with the word if, that is not a rap beef. That is a coordinated attempt to hurt somebody at their most vulnerable moment. And there is no version of the internet where that framing does not travel. Because every woman listening to that Spaces who has ever been pregnant, or been through a divorce, or been through infidelity, or been through a whisper campaign, heard Cardi's voice and recognized the pattern. That is why the Spaces went viral in the first 8 hours. It was not about the rap. It was about the recognition. Now, is that the story BIA would tell? Absolutely not. And BIA has the right to come back and tell her own version. And if she does, I will cover it here, front to back, with the same forensic energy I am covering this side with. But right now, in this snapshot of the timeline, BIA has said one thing publicly. Everything I said was true, and I stand on it. And that is not a defense. That is a doubling down. And doubling down without evidence in the age of receipts is a losing move. Every hour BIA stays quiet. Cardi's version becomes more established as the default reading. Every hour BIA stays quiet. The pregnancy rumor angle becomes more permanent in the search results. And Cardi knows that. Cardi is not chasing BIA. Cardi is letting the silence do the damage, which is the most patient move I have seen Cardi make in 5 years of being famous. Let me tighten it back up and give you the through line, because there is one, and it is important. This whole 3-artist saga is really about one question. What do we owe each other, as women, in an industry that has almost no rules? Doja is answering that question by saying, I owe you civility, but I do not owe you my nervous system. Cardi is answering that question by saying, I owe you nothing if you touched my family, and I owe everyone else the truth about what happened. And BIA is answering that question by saying, I do not owe anybody an apology if I still believe I was right. 3 answers, 3 strategies, 3 futures. And every listener at home is going to instinctively pick the answer that matches how they themselves have moved through their own life conflicts. That is why this story is landing so hard. And that is why the comment sections on every commentary video about this cycle are already spiraling past 1,000 replies. Because this is not just a celebrity story. This is a mirror. And if you have been paying attention to how the culture responds to each of those postures, you already know which one is going to age the best. Doja's answer is the answer that scales. Doja's answer is the answer that ages into wisdom. Doja's answer is the answer that lets you keep making music for the next 20 years without dragging a war behind you. Cardi's answer is loud, but Cardi's answer is also legally and personally defensible, because Cardi is not attacking BIA's art. Cardi is defending her own family. And BIA's answer. I have to be honest with you. BIA's answer is the one that has the shortest lifespan. Because you cannot build a career on being the person who refused to apologize to a pregnant woman. Not in this era. Not with the receipts culture we are living in. Not with the audience being as smart as it is. Not with the algorithm burying non-apologizers and boosting reconciliation clips the way it has been for the last 2 years. BIA's math does not add up on the platform she needs to survive on, and BIA is going to feel that mathematics before this news cycle is finished. There is another dimension of this whole story that I want to lay on the table, because it has been quietly humming in the background of every take I have watched, and nobody has said it out loud yet. This is a story about the difference between drama and defense. Doja Cat, in her stream, kept using the word de-escalation, and Cardi B, in her spaces, kept using the word family. Those are 2 completely different postures. Drama is when you fight because the timeline expects you to. Defense is when you fight because the alternative is letting somebody rewrite your life without your permission. Doja does not have a defense obligation in this cycle because BIA did not touch Doja's family. BIA touched Doja's ego. And Doja is not defending her ego. Cardi does have a defense obligation in this cycle because BIA allegedly touched Cardi's marriage, Cardi's pregnancy, and Cardi's kids. And Cardi is defending exactly that. The reason those 2 responses look so different is because the underlying attacks were so different. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. Doja's calm is not moral superiority over Cardi. Doja's calm is a different threat model. I also want to name something that a lot of you have been feeling but might not have language for yet. The reason Cardi's spaces hit so hard is because Cardi did not just accuse BIA. Cardi named the mechanism. Cardi said BIA was doing weird industry stuff. Cardi said BIA was going through producer channels. Cardi said BIA was talking to people who were in Cardi's ex-husband's circle. That framing, weird industry stuff, is Cardi telling the culture that there is a whole hidden layer of the music business where reputations get assassinated before they ever hit the internet, and BIA was allegedly operating on that layer. Once you name that layer out loud, you make the audience curious about it. You make the audience want to find other examples of it. You make the audience start pattern matching every other feud they have ever watched and asking themselves, was that beef organic, or was somebody planting? That is the deeper reason this Spaces is going to keep trending for days. It is not just about Cardi and BIA. It is about how many other stories in hip-hop history might have started the same way. And I want to say one more thing about the way Cardi closed the Spaces, because I do not think enough people have talked about it. Cardi ended the whole conversation by saying she was being nice to BIA, and BIA took her kindness for weakness. That is a very specific rhetorical move. It is not just a sign-off. It is a repositioning. Cardi is telling the audience, the version of me you have seen up until now, the version that told her fans not to harass BIA, The version that gave BIA an olive branch on stage. The version that stayed silent for months. That was the polite version. And BIA misread that politeness. And now the polite version is retired. That means whatever Cardi drops next, whether it is the reference track, whether it is the 3 sources, whether it is a new record, whether it is a full documentary, is going to arrive under the header, "This is what happens when the polite version leaves the building." That is a marketing setup. That is a rollout setup. That is a full album positioning setup. And I would be shocked if we did not see Cardi convert this news cycle into a music moment within the next quarter. So where does this leave us tonight? I will give you my read, and then I want yours in the comments, because I have been sitting with this for a full day and I want to hear how you are landing on it. My read is this. Doja is the winner of this news cycle, and Doja did not even try to be. She showed up as herself, played the record she wanted to play, accepted an apology like a grown woman, and left the internet holding a mirror it did not want to look into. Cardi is the emotional protagonist of this news cycle, because Cardi turned a rap beef into a family defense case in real time, and the receipts she brought are going to keep this conversation alive for weeks. And BIA is the character with the most work to do, because BIA now has to explain the inconsistency. Why one apology? Why not the other? And BIA has not offered a single coherent answer to that question yet. Every audience will read the standings a little differently, but nobody is going to argue that these 3 women did not just define 3 different templates for how to survive a viral moment. And every artist watching this cycle right now is taking notes on which template fits their own brand best. Which means the next 3 months of Celebrity Feud coverage is going to look very different from the last 3 months. Because Doja just proved you can win by not swinging, Cardi just proved you can win by swinging with receipts, and BI just proved you can lose by swinging without them. There is a version of this whole story that ends with BIA finding a graceful exit, releasing new music, apologizing to Cardi off camera in a way that lets everybody move on with dignity, and getting back to her own art. That version is on the table. That version is available. That version would be the smart move. Whether BIA takes it, that is the loop I am leaving open for you tonight, because that is the loop the algorithm is going to reward when we come back for the follow-up. And I will be honest, I do not think BIA takes that exit. I think BIA responds with a record. I think BIA responds with a Twitter thread. I think BIA responds with an interview on a friendly platform. I do not think BIA has the temperament to walk out of this without swinging at least one more time. And if she swings one more time, Cardi is going to swing back with the folder she already told you she has. And that folder, 3 named sources, 1 reference track, 1 alleged network, is the folder that ends this entire chapter. And here is what I need from you right now, because your voice is what makes this whole rundown work. Drop your verdict below. Do you think Cardi was justified in going nuclear? Or do you think she should have handled it privately? Do you think Doja is genuinely evolved? Or do you think Doja is performing evolution for the timeline? Do you think BIA still has a lane out of this? Or do you think she has painted herself into the corner of her own career? Sound off. Every single comment gets read. Every single verdict gets weighed. And when the next chapter hits, and it is going to hit, because these stories never stay quiet for long, you and I are going to break it down together, piece by piece, receipt by receipt, exactly the way we did tonight. If this is the first time you are catching me, welcome in. We do this every single week. We go deeper than the headline. We chase the receipts, and we do not do surface-level takes. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notifications. Hit the like button if this rundown gave you value. And if you have got somebody in your circle who is still confused about how Doja, Cardi, and BIA all ended up in the same news cycle, share this video with them so they can catch up. That is the plate for tonight. That is the rundown. And I already know what tomorrow's story is, because BIA is going to say something, and Cardi is going to have a receipt for it, and Doja is going to keep her calm, and the whole cycle is going to spin one more time. When it does, I will see you right back here. Until then, stay loud, stay locked in, and stay smarter than the timeline. Peace.